Hello, fellow AI art enthusiasts. My name is Thane, and for this video, I wanted to check out some styles in the key of what would look good with sci-fi themes. As you may have noticed, I am a fan of science fiction. And Midjourney can produce very awesome-looking sci-fi images. But as I also like the SREF feature a lot, I wanted to explore some of them more closely, so here are 50 sci-fi themed styles for you. First, let's again go through the process. As I checked out all of these styles already with a prompt of just a single period symbol, this time I used actual words for the prompt to direct it better. First prompt is kind of an overview of a style in landscape aspect ratio. It also comes in handy as a background. I used the name I selected for each of the styles as the prompt. There were many styles that actually ended up with science fiction in their name. But I also selected some styles that seem to generate sci-fi imagery in my opinion. And a few may actually have not looked like sci-fi at all, but I selected them anyway, because I thought they might look cool. I normally use standard settings. The parameters I use are all listed on the screen each time you see images. The big one that changes everything is the --SREF, followed by a number. These are the numbers that I've been exploring, and each one represents a different looking style. They may be similar at times, but there are significant differences to them in the way they behave. Then I basically always use the seed number 777. Again, that is just a personal preference that you don't have to use unless you want to make exact same images as I have. It's a simple number and it's easier to share that compared to going and digging up random numbered seeds. I have done that with the prompts that you see in the beginning and end sections of my videos. Well, I have randomly predetermined the number and used it also with the --seed. Otherwise, it's kind of tedious looking the seed number up if you have not entered it as part of your prompt. We also already discussed the aspect ratio. It is set with the --AR width:height. Midjourney does have predetermined image size and the aspect ratio plays around in the constraints of the size. And lastly, I typically use the latest version of Midjourney. During the making of this video, the default version was 6.1. So I have set that with --6.1. You don't actually have to specify this. If you have in your settings to use default version, this is the one that you will get, unless a newer version has been released. Second section for each style is 4 image grids, side by side. I really like the 9:16 aspect ratio, and I can fit 4 image grids side by side on the screen to look at them at once. Yes, I could also do the same, with landscape aspect ratio for better comparison, but I prefer it this way. And I can also showcase how aspect ratio changes the outcome in this manner. For this video, I chose exclusively science fiction related words. Spaceship, sentient, biomechanical, starbase. You could probably use these words with any style and get awesome-looking sci-fi images. But let's see what happens if the styles are already inclined towards science fiction. Before we do that, I would like to take the opportunity to thank my patrons who have really helped me keep this channel going in recent times. As a perk to my paid members, I have shared all the prompts in PDF format from my latest videos, along with some extras from the process of making the video. But now, let's look at the styles. 2.8. Gloomy Monastic Sombre. Starting with a style that didn't actually look like sci-fi on first look. I love this gloomy look that this does. Not over the top, but still some sci-fi elements. 6.7. Futuristic Traditional Fusion. Yet another one that was more in the retro sci-fi style, with some traditional Asian elements woven in. I love the crimson. It looks so whimsy and almost fake, but it has a very distinct 60s feel. 8.4. Sci-Fi Naturalism Fusion. This one obviously did have some sci-fi elements to it before, but lots of natural elements as well. On closer look, it also looks kind of retro, slightly futuristic, but not obviously fake looking. 9.1. Desolate Urban Futurescape. Definitely desolate, definitely urban with a hint of futurism, but not over the top. On closer look, it has a cool graphic style with lots of wires. Not too high-tech. 1.8.2. Dynamic Sci-Fi Combat Illustrations. This feels more like anime. The name obviously brings in the combat element. On closer look, we don't seem to have that much combat. This looks very brown and otherwise warm tones with a comic book feel. 346. Retro Sci-Fi Dystopia. Indeed very retro and 60s theme with some flying saucers. The closer look continues the 60s or 70s retro feel. It has kind of a sepia tint and not very vibrant colors. 357. Atmospheric Sci-Fi Realism. Very mysterious and misty. Seems to prefer all kinds of orbs. It has a very interesting color scheme. I absolutely love this. It is slightly minimalistic and it looks great, with the science fiction theme. 388. Anime-inspired sci-fi. Anime with a dark blue color scheme. And the anime style really does come through with the closer look as well. We get some really nice results. 443. Dark Detailed Futuristic. Indeed very dark and very detailed industrial-looking style. It certainly has its own special aesthetic. There might be slightly too much going on for my taste, but overall, I do like it. 467. Retro Futuristic Stylized. Again, very retro futurism. Unfortunately, landscape aspect ratio seems to have many black borders. I don't like when those appear. Closer look is better. Very vintage and retro feel. Again, 60s sci-fi, which looks slightly fake, but it's an aesthetic. 521. Alien Ice Frontier. I love this. It has some weird alien structures on an alien planet with a lovely color scheme. The closer look also does some amazing looking stuff. Looks kind of like concept art. And I like that some of the images are on kind of a blank background and floating. 544. Ornate Futuristic Metropolis. This has some saucer shapes, but not exactly sci-fi on first glance. Indeed, very ornate. But it fits nicely with the science fiction themes. I just noticed that I was expecting the starbases to be in space, but we have seen kind of sci-fi cities instead, so far. 563. Golden Mythic Odyssey. This is possibly fantasy on another planet, not necessarily sci-fi themed. Illustrative with golden color scheme. It does fit well with the sci-fi theme though. It becomes a very distinct looking comic or graphic novel illustration style. 617. Olive Retro Sci-Fi. Very dark, green and slightly cinematic with a dystopian gloomy feel to it. It certainly is its own aesthetic. I might like it more if it had some contrast. Maybe this would look better mixed with another SREF style. 645. Retro Futuristic Ochre. Yet another very retro futuristic style, with red. But notice how different they all actually are. This looks even more red than we have seen. I love the antennae and the bright red goggles. 648. Monochrome Retro Sci-Fi. This looks like something in between photography and graphic illustration, but actually it's more graphic. When adding sci-fi themes, this also seems to get kind of a green tint to the monochromatic coloring. 664. Sage Dystopian Futurism. Again retro, but I think this time with an 80s feel. Very muted colors fitting for a dystopia. Still looks very grey with muted colors. Indeed, looks very dystopian and kind of dark, but with a retro look. 685. Iridescent Sci-Fi Fantasy. Very bright, borderline fantastic with some tilted views. The tilting continues, also the bright space glow. Definitely looks more like modern science fiction with a superhero universe edition. 738. Purple Eerie Otherworldly. This was another one that didn't look exclusively sci-fi on first look, but it had some elements that I thought I wanted to test out. But on closer look, maybe not that sci-fi after all. It looks kind of scary, possibly alien and definitely really weird. 792. Muted Retro Futuristic. We sure do see a lot of these retro futuristic styles. Here is yet another one, but again, similar, but very different. This one also has the red and fake look, but it is muted. Also the clothing elements seem to have lots of ribbed materials. 866. Neon Sci-Fi Surrealism. Indeed, neon, slightly glowy. Definitely has some space. Might be just a bit too much going on. But on closer look, this looks amazing. Very weird looking stuff here, slightly retro, but very inventive. 871. Sepia Steampunk Futurism. Definitely sepia toned, has kind of a scaffolding or blueprint feel to it with a hint of surrealism. Not really seeing the steampunk here. Faces seem to be looks from the side, kind of like blueprints. 888. Dark Monochrome Dystopian. Well, it is very dark and foggy with a few lights here and there with some guys lurking around. It ends up being very dark and horror-like, but kind of a fitting aesthetic for some sci-fi themes. Something between graphics and cinematic. 903. Vibrant Retro Futurism. A severe contrast to the previous. This looks very happy, vibrant and whimsical with blue skies. On closer look, still very happy and whimsical, kind of childlike, but also very weird. 991. Muted Retro Futuristic. And yet another Retro Futurism style, this time with a dash. I love the glass domes and the brochure feel. This doesn't look entirely fake. It looks like actual constructs with a retro feel. The rabbit Darth Vader makes me think of 70s sci-fi. 1044. Metallic Futuristic Surrealism. I think I added this to this selection because of the futurism in the name of the style. But when applied sci-fi words, this looks like a very unique metallic aesthetic. 1071. Golden Sci-Fi Fantasy. This one looks lovely. Kind of graphic, lots of planets in the sky with desert cities on alien planets. The yellow and gold swooshes really stand out with this style. It's sleek and more modern sci-fi. 1106. Lavender Sci-Fi Metropolis. I get a kind of an old-school cartoon feel from this. Definitely slightly retro, but in an 80s context. Very pink actually, not that lavender. Slightly too detailed for a cartoon. 1141. Retro Futuristic Expedition. Yet another 60s science fiction with vehicles and planetary expeditions. Indeed, very 60s, looks kind of fake. The color scheme has a muted sepia toning. Some red, but it's very faint and more like pink. 1214. Monochrome Cyberpunk Noir. I get an 80s feel from this. And indeed, looks like monochrome, cyberpunk. There is kind of a greenish-bluish tint in some of the images, but mostly still very monochrome. If it wasn't this monochrome, I would expect very neon coloring from this. 1230. Luminous Sci-Fi Cinematic. This also has an 80s feel to it. Kind of cyberpunk, but not too colorful. It does seem to get a more modern look with the LED lights. Not one of my favorites, but to each their own. 1231. Frosty Sci-Fi Digital Illustration. Indeed very illustrative style with exploration of alien planets in spacesuits. This really fits well with the science fiction thematics. It produces very nice-looking illustrations. 1292. Sepia-toned Retro Futuristic Minimalistic. Back to retro. Very sleek shapes. And again a 60s sci-fi feel. I'm not loving the black borders, but you can fix those. Looks kind of like a black and white movie, but not obviously fake looking. 1408. Digital Realistic Detailed Scenic. I thought I saw some hints of sci-fi in the original look at this style, but not so much here. But adding in some sci-fi words really has some very impressive outcomes. A mixture of stylized photography or graphics, slightly retro. Gorgeous images. 1416. Azure Minimalist Futuristic. This is obviously a kind of a graphic novel style with a very distinct color scheme that looks almost white with some yellow highlights and blue shadows. It looks very nice with science fiction themes. There is lots of detail, but not too much clutter in the images. 1515. Retro Futuristic Sketch Realism. Yet another Retro Futurism style, but this time as a sketch. Obviously we get some red highlights here again. The end result is very lovely. Not too fake looking, very inventive and strange looking outcomes. 1532. Dystopian Inked Horizons. This style has a graphic novel feel. For some reason this really reminds me of Star Wars. Not so much Star Wars feel on closer look though, but I do like this style. It has an interesting color scheme and it's not too dark. 1548. Monochrome Sci-Fi Sketches. Some more detailed sketches of spaceships. It did get a science fiction in its name for the style. The closer look images look even more gorgeous to me. There is a slight hint of yellow or salmon pink. 1554. Dystopian Alien Structures. This looks almost like it's sketched, but it also kind of looks like cinematic with just some really specific details that make these structures look like they were drawn. On closer look, this might go more towards a sketch or a blueprint, but the backgrounds are more real sometimes. Overall a very unique looking style, I like it. 1695. Futuristic Neon Pop. Very colorful stylized illustration. It's interesting how the background is actually more colorful and the faces are kind of in the shadows. Closer look does similar things, the background is more colorful than what is the subject of the image. But the result looks very unique. 1739. Alien Techno Exploration. These images look like they were painted. Kind of a video game concept art look. Very unique look for the science fiction related words. Maybe possibly too much going on in the background for me, so it's kind of hard to separate the main subject of the image. 1779. Luminous Sci-Fi Odyssey. Kind of a retro feel with neon lights. Looks unique, but not one of my favorites. I do like the colors, but something is just too strange for me. 1800. Bleak Industrial Void. Definitely a science fiction themed style. There is no mention of sci-fi in the prompt, but it looks so sci-fi to me. Kind of illustrative. Lovely outcomes with the portrait aspect ratio. I like how the subjects are visible clearly and distinct from the background. And so strange. 1837. Obsidian Moon Citadel. Obviously not our moon. And there are some flying saucers and sci-fi feel, even with no specific mention. The color scheme is slightly too dark for me. Cool imagery, but not one of my favorites. I liked the landscape aspect ratio more. 1852. Amber Glacial Frontier. An illustrative style, kind of retro, obviously alien planets by the look of the celestial bodies in the sky of most of these images. On closer look, it's a nice style for a graphic novel. Yellow and blue color scheme, no glaciers in sight, actually. 1882. Ancient Frosted Realm. Maybe more fantasy, but we shall see. Kind of retro looking. Very nice with the science fiction words. Dark, retro, but not entirely fake looking. The illustrative look may help alleviate the fakeness. 1890. Neo-Vintage Retro Utopia. This may just be Retro Futurism without any sci-fi, but there is one flying craft in one of the images. We have seen so many of these, but this is yet again totally different. This kind of mixes in fashion and models in with the Retro Futurism. 1908. Fossilized Dune Landscapes. Really lovely landscapes indeed. I guess the sci-fi is in the very alien look of the landscapes. But this style looks lovely with the science fiction words. The dunes do seem to appear in most of the images. 1918. Pastoral Space Fantasy. Very retro and quite fake looking, but obviously sci-fi feel. I think the pastoral just came through with the original images. But yet again, very fake retro 60s sci-fi that is totally distinct and different looking, although the style is seemingly similar. 1980. Retro Sci-Fi Isolation. This feels more like 70s or 80s retro. I really do like these. This looks like not so fake looking 80s retro sci-fi. Very unique looking, slightly cinematic. Alright, so those were the sci-fi styles I selected to take a deeper look at. I kind of had a feeling that there might be more of these, but as you can see, it almost took me 2,000 styles to get 50 sci-fi styles. The majority was retro 60s style science fiction. But as you could see, each and every one of them was distinctly different. But there were some really amazing styles that didn't look that special on the first look, but boy, was I surprised to see them in the context of actual sci-fi words. So if you are into sci-fi, I hope you found some interesting styles to experiment with. I do plan on exploring other themes as well in my future videos, so stay tuned. I thank you so much for watching, and let's continue prompting.